Morning, everybody. Um, I want to spend some time talking about Chapter 4 in our ethics textbook. And it's the title of the chapter is Taking Individual Responsibility. I think that that's a pretty heavy topic. I think that when I first read this, I was like, wow, that's a totally new concept for some people um, in their personal lives, in their work lives, but in their political lives, if you will, in their public lives, taking personal responsibility for your actions, for your decisions, and for everything that goes on. I kind of go through this book. To me, the book is it's hard to follow. So I kind of motor through part of it, and there's things that kind of jump out at me that I will certainly share with you. And some of those, um, I guess, those headings that I look at. Um, on page 94, there's a paragraph. It says a public manager's first task is to fix the problem and only secondarily to fix the blame. I've often said that in my view, that blame is that finding blame or placing blame is a misguided use of energy. Now, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't hold people accountable for um, their actions and their decisions. I'm not saying that. But many times we spend too much time on trying to figure out whose fault it is and not fixing what happened or fixing the problem. There are many instances, I believe, where blame is just pointless. That it doesn't matter or it doesn't help any situation. And so, as we think about that, we need to be ethically supportive and ethically responsible. Blame. Think about blame. And the next heading there is we're individually responsible for our decisions and behavior. That kind of goes without saying. That's what's kind of funny about some stuff. I'm sorry, this thing's hurting my ear. Is that um, some of these things to me are like common sense, but they get all muddied and murky a lot of times when we get into the application of these concepts or into the different environments where these concepts are used. The book goes on to talk about the fact that we can't hide behind anybody or anything when we are talking about our decisions and being responsible for them. We can't hide behind our boss. We can't hide behind our desk. Um, it talks about moral inversion situations in which something evil has been successfully packaged to be good. It's still evil. It makes matters worse. Um, and then the conflict of obeying authority and forgetting about what's right and wrong. And we dealt with that a little bit in the last activity of, unfortunately, I guess, we talk about right and wrong and morals and ethics. Everybody doesn't have the same standard. Everybody doesn't have the same belief. And so looking at that is different. He goes on to talk about, FEMA, and he's talked about Katrina and the response there and how that played out. We can't hide behind our subordinates. We can't hide behind our ignorance. And this is kind of leading me up to where I want to be in this conversation. You may think, where's she going with this? But I think that, we can't hide behind our ignorance. We don't know what we don't know, but we need to make every effort to know what we should know in order to do our job. And when you think specifically about fire and emergency services, your ignorance could have some very, very far-reaching impact, have a very far-reaching impact. It can mean life or death is the bottom line. So you want to make, ignorance is not an excuse. I didn't know. Why didn't you know? You should have known. And there's a lot of things that the author discusses in this, where it talks about getting the facts, making sure that that's a part of the process of making ethical decisions, is that we should have the facts. Exhibit 4.2 talks about getting the facts. Are underlying analytical assumptions known and open? Are significant omissions disclosed? Are reliability and error estimates provided? Are factual disagreements declared? And so forth and so on. Those are on page 102 in your book. There's 7 of them. People can't, they just can't hide behind any of this. And that's, to me, the very nature of public government. Now, oftentimes they do, and oftentimes we allow them to. Maybe it is that situation where, as the book uses the example of, is the city manager responsible for the road crews break, unauthorized coffee break? I didn't know about it. How can I be responsible for that when I didn't know about it? Many times, and I think this is true in emergency services because of the family nature of it, is we tend to maybe cover up things that we don't want the boss to know, out of protection for the boss in some ways. If he doesn't know, he can't be held responsible. Or we cover up things because of, for our coworkers, because we don't want them to get in trouble, or, that sort of thing. And so we have to kind of think about that as far as ethics is concerned, and different situations that we are put in ethically. Going on over to, I'm going to look at kind of on page 106, this concept of incompetence being an abuse of office. Man, if this is a catch-22 situation or a double-edged sword, I don't know what you want to call it, but it really caught my eye. Competence is an ongoing aspiration, an unmoving and therefore always unmet goal. Yet, if incompetence is an abuse of office, how do we ever become competent enough to do our jobs? So I think that's the catch-22 of it. We can't know everything. We can't, and that's a situation of micromanagement. We only, if you think about the city manager and the road crew's coffee break, he may have people in between, but if they didn't feel like it was important enough to share with him or her, that he's not going to know. And so I think it is a real catch-22. Excuse me. The book talks about the competence standard is related logically to responsibility for the specialized knowledge associated with the profession, and striving for professional excellence. And that's, I think that's what we have to do as we navigate this ethical tightrope in many ways, as we go through this. We have probably all worked for people that we felt were incompetent. I hate that word. And I don't hate that word. I think that the word incompetent is a very strong word. Because many times incompetency, when I think of incompetency, I think of a lack of ability. And many times it may just be that it's not a lack of ability, it's just a lack of knowledge. And people can learn, you can educate past your incompetency or practice or whatever it's going to take. The Peter Principle describes how people are promoted until they are inadequate. And I've often heard that, they are promoted to their highest level of inadequacy. And why they feel that way is I don't understand it. I want people to be successful. but that does not mean that they have to remain where they are. They should be challenged. So this whole concept of being competent and incompetent, a lot of times incompetent is used to me as a cuss word. I don't know. I can't think of a better way to put it. Many times incompetency or our competence comes from sheer luck. You know, you've never, or this may be the first time you've encountered this situation. You make a decision, and boy, it was the right one. It's not because you are totally competent. Maybe it's just because you are lucky. But we need to think about competence. And the book goes on to talk about that it doesn't necessarily mean perfection, but it means perfecting. To do the best that can be done, given the state of the technical art and within reasonable limits. And I think that's a good definition of competency. Doing the best that can be done with what you have to work with. Time, knowledge, the situation itself, those that support you or don't support you. Sometimes our incompetence or the appearance of incompetence may be the result of those individuals that don't want to see us succeed. So there's the book refers on 107 to a fair competence standard, perfecting performance, effort and outcome, and doing the best that can be done given the state of the art and reasonable time. Doing the best you can do with what you've been given to work with. So, and then self-victimization is the next category there, and that's where it talks about the Peter Principle. And it says, when in charge, ponder; when in trouble, delegate; when in doubt, mumble. That came from testimony in a House subcommittee. So I think that I'm not sure that's truly ethical when he talks about that. So I hope that we will think about that as we think about incompetence and what makes an individual appear incompetent may not always be their fault. And again, it's that blame game. Do we really want to place all that game? A lot of times, and I think we see this in the fire service, sometimes the person that is most knowledgeable or maybe has the most length of service does not necessarily mean that they're the most competent. And they're promoted to that position, and then it's their highest level of incompetency. And on 109, I think we kind of bring it to kind of a wrap-up place of leaving responsibility where it belongs. It belongs in the hands of the individual managers. We can't make decisions for them. We need to make sure as subordinates that we are giving information so that an educated decision can be made. If we are the decision maker, we need to make sure we have all the information that we could possibly have at that moment in time and within the time frame that we have to make this decision. Many times on emergency scenes, especially, and I'm not sure that, when we're talking about ethical decisions, I'm not sure that those are made on the fire ground. Those are more gut, practical type of decisions. I don't know about the ethical piece of it. There may be some ethics that are involved there, but usually our ethics involve, and that'd be something I'd be interested to hearing your comments about, how you feel about emergency scenes versus non-emergency, day-to-day operations, administrative type things. There may be guidelines to help us make decisions. There may be guidelines to help us give information so decisions can be made. But the basic chapter, there's guidelines to taking individual responsibility, that we are individually responsible for our decisions and behavior. And I think that when people realize that, they have reached a new level. I work with many people that have not realized that. It's always somebody else's fault. It's always, this administration or the business office, or I don't care what it is. It's never their fault. And the guilt always lies with somebody else. Guilt is again, it's kind of like blame, misplaced. But we have to take responsibility for our own decisions. And I think that that creates an ethical environment. I did this. I was wrong. You could justify it, maybe. I didn't have enough information. I thought I had all the information, but in the end, it's my fault. It's my responsibility with this decision. We're responsible for what is done along with how it's done. We can't say we want XYZ and not, but that's not how I wanted you to do it. We're responsible for that, for what is done and how it's done. Incompetence is abuse of office. And again, that's a strong term for me, but I think it's recognizing that in that definition of incompetence that the book brings out, that it's not perfection, it is perfecting, an effort to do the best that can be done given the state of the technical art and the time allowed. That's the incompetence that we're talking about, or competence that we're talking about. It's not perfect. It's not knowing everything. Leave responsibility where it belongs. And many times, if we have to take responsibility for our own decisions. I think that brings us back to that very first one. So there's a lot that goes into this whole process of decision making, ethical decision making, placing blame. And I think there's a difference in placing blame and taking and placing responsibility. Many times we do have to place responsibility. We take responsibility for our own decisions. But blaming people, I just think it's misguided. I just think it's a waste of time. And I could be very wrong. You can certainly disagree with that. But I think that we have to look at the right thing to do. Your book mentions something. One of the things that caught my eye was impossible promises. I was getting ready to close, and then I saw that, and that always makes me think about like the presidential campaigns. I'm going to balance the budget, and I want to say, do you realize that it's like a gazillion dollars in debt? How are you going to do that? That's, to me, that's an impossible promise. And it uses the example of the competence that everybody felt working together to, the eagle has landed when we landed on the moon. And then it didn't take long with the Apollo 11 and the Challenger and the Challenger disaster and then the Columbia disaster to erode that confidence. So it may be, it's not perfection. It's not going to be good all the time. It may be things that have to be remedied. So I want to hear your thoughts on this, and I'm going to post this or pose this in the form of a discussion question. I would love it if you would video your discussion. You can do it from your phone and upload that to as a file, or if you want to just simply type it out, that's fine too. But I think I want to hear what you think about responsibility and blame and competence and incompetence and taking responsibility. I think that it's the true form of ethics when somebody can say, yeah. I had a chief that was such a humble person that he took responsibility even when it really wasn't. I think that we have to make sure that we share responsibility. We don't always have to be the scapegoat. That's not what I'm saying. But he stood up and said, "It's my fault," And I think that there's learning in that for all of us when somebody can say, "I was responsible for this decision. I did not make the right decision. This is why, and this is what we learned from it." always learn from those mistakes. So let me have your thoughts. And like I say, I'm going to put something on there about the discussion board that kind of phrases this in the form of a discussion question in chapter 4. Thanks so much. As we kind of motor through this book, I think we're learning a lot about ourselves, perhaps our organizations, and about workplaces in general. Thanks. Bye.